Thanks, Teresa. Welcome back, everyone, to the Public Hearings Committee for October 5th, 2022. I'd like to call the meeting to order. If I could have a mover and seconder to approve the agenda with the following amendments. Replacement due to clerical and administrative changes. Item 4.1 CD 22-093. Item 4.2 CD 22-088. And item 4.3 CD 22-085. The addition of item 4.5 staff report CS 22-168 regarding the proposed closure and conveyance of King Street Plan 48B in Wyndham. And are there any other changes? No. Okay. If mover and seconder, please. Councillor Michelli, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? That's carried. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I now officially open the public meetings held under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and County Policy. Please be advised that to preserve your right to appeal to the Ontario Land Tribunal, you are required to make comments or provide written submissions prior to the passage of a bylaw. These meetings are to allow the public to provide initial comments on presented planning matters. For two of the items on our agenda today, committee is requested to make a decision on the matters. For two of the agenda items, further reports will come forward at a future date and no final decisions will be made on these matters today. 4.1 County initiated official plan amendment and implementing bylaw to streamline and delegate decisions on certain types of minor zoning bylaws in accordance with the Bill 13 changes to the Ontario Planning Act CD 22-093. And I guess this is Brandon and Tricia will be presenting this report.
Thank you and good afternoon through the chair. This item is about helping to streamline the development application process. So over the last several years, there's been a number of minor, we'll call them minor zoning amendments that have required both staff time, council time to prepare reports, presentations, consider bylaws, clerk's time even as well. Some of these include, some examples are, we had a deeming bylaw for a site on Jalen Crescent in Port Dover. There's a temporary use extension for a mobile home on the west side of the county. We had to lift the holding provision and wait from the summer break to start construction on a subdivision in Delhi. We did a change of zoning for a small property on Queensway in Simcoe to commercial that complied with the commercial designation straight up to facilitate a severance. There's rezoning of a small parcel in a rural hamlet in Ward 1. That had rural hamlet zoning on either side, and the designation was rural hamlet, and there was no site-specific provisions about it. And there's each year we bring forward we call it a housekeeping update, but editorial changes to some of the clauses and text to correct some of the matters in the bylaw. The report outlines, on average, how many of those we'll have in a given year. The provincial legislation now allows these minor zoning amendments to be delegated and approved to staff, as long as the municipality has official plan policies that are updated to do so, and that you pass a delegation bylaw. So in our ongoing efforts to streamline and make enhancements to our development process here at Norfolk, we're recommending to move forward with this. I would note that last year, council and staff did streamline some of these exact type of applications. Through a report that we kind of reduced the amount of reporting that was needed, and some items could go directly to the bylaws portion of the council agenda. However, with this change proposed today, on average, it could help shorten the time frame for these smaller applications and applicants by about 2 to 6 weeks. As you know, time is money for applicants and owners. We need to be efficient with our staff resource and all the priorities that we have to do with our staff. Recommend change. It would still see the required circulations and the public notification that's required under the Planning Act. That would still happen for those types that require it. And there would still be, of course, the application fee. So what we're suggesting is, should there be no issue, or maybe there's a quick question that can easily be resolved, with the new approach, the Director of Planning would be able to quickly approve these bylaw changes, and then the applicant could proceed to build or whatever they need to do. This is similar to the telecom policy that we have, and what we're recommending in this delegated bylaw is that It still would be done in consultation with the mayor and board councillor. So there's still the circulation. Council still copied on the circulation. A member of council could flag it and say, I think this one needs to come to council. Or conversely, the director of planning or staff could flag this one and say, we've had a few public comments come in. Connect with the ward councillor and our mayor and say, we think this one should come to council. And so it could still go there, especially if we have public input. We're also suggesting that we do an annual report that would inform council on how many were considered in a given year under that delegation. And of course, and there's a clause included in the bylaw that council could rescind this at any time, depending on how things go. So that is what we're recommending at this time and available for any questions.
Councilor Martin.
Thanks, Mayor Chop. Through you to staff. The three specific delegations, the first two are great. The third is probably great, but it gives me a bit of anxiety because change is scary and ultimately the buck kind of stops with us. So in hearing you speak about the circulation still occurring in consultation with the mayor and the ward councillor, I think that's great. That makes me feel a little bit better. I guess I wanted to take the opportunity to clarify with you that should for some reason the ward councillor or the mayor decide that this is something that they'd like to see come to council, there certainly will be enough time to do that. Question, will there be enough time to do that? Because we know with the Ford government's proposed changes for reduced public consultation and so on, that we're really going to be strapped for time. So I know we're looking to expedite things and reduce red tape and make it easier, but will there be enough time? I guess is my question, to pull the item and have it addressed at council if needed.
So through the chair, I would suggest that the time frame would be the circulation period. So there's usually like a 3 or 4 week circulation period when that notification goes out. So during that time frame, that would be the time for the member of council to flag that. And then within a week or so, depending on the results, there'll still be a week or two to finalize matters. You are correct. There is a lot of pressure to get these through quickly. I would suggest anything that's a zoning amendment, though, that's associated with the subdivision, an official plan amendment, like those items would still come to council. Anything that's a zoning and they're proposing, well, I want it to be rural hamlet, but I also want to add this use or something different than the base zone, those would still come to council as well. Or if they want to reduce the lot width that's different than the base zone, still comes to council.
Okay, thank you. And if I may, could I make a suggestion? So sometimes in this particular situation through the circulation period, the emails don't always come to the ward councillor. Sometimes they go directly to staff only. Is there a way that, my fear is that a lot of public consultation is coming in, but staff may look at it as fairly straightforward. The ward councillor might not be aware, and then there's a missed opportunity to address it publicly. Is there a way to loop in within the consultation period, the ward councillor, of increased communications?
Through the chair, I would suggest that when the director of planning is receiving that information from the planner that has done the circulation, and if there's zero, I guess either there's zero or there is any input, the director of planning could message the ward councillor and advise, we have this application circulated, we don't have any input, and we're going to be proceeding unless we hear otherwise. That could be a trigger point.
That sounds great. I wouldn't want to make more work for staff because the point is to reduce it. But if that's an option, great. Otherwise, maybe, I don't know if this is permitted, but in our circulation material through the communications period, could we add both, ward councillor emails, mayor, ward councillor, and staffs, so that communication is just being farmed out to the ward councillor as well?
Through the chair, I'll work with our director Tricia on kind of the most efficient way. We don't want to take too much time on all of the back and forth, but there's likely an efficient way that we can do it. And Tricia is indicating, yes, it's possible.
Further questions from council? If not, great work, Brandon. I need a mover and a seconder, for staff's recommendation that staff report CD 093 for county initiated official plan amendment and associated bylaw to streamline and delegate certain types of minor zoning bylaws be received for information. That the county initiated official plan amendment application OPNL 2022238 and associated delegation bylaws to streamline and delegate certain types of minor zoning bylaws be approved, as shown in attachments B and C to report CD 22-093. And further, that any comments received as part of the statutory public meeting process be considered for the decision on the application OPNL 2022238. And before I move to that, my apologies. Is there anybody here that wishes to speak to this item? I'm going to assume not, but is there anyone online that wishes to speak to this matter? Okay, then a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Rabbits. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Next item is 4.2 application ZNPL 2022265 that's proposing to amend the zoning for the lands at 323 St. George Street in Port Dover from neighborhood institutional zone to neighborhood institutional zone with a special provision to also permit a hotel, place of assembly, and place of entertainment with modified definitions. Also, the special provision of the residential type R2 zone for 327 St. George Street is proposed to be amended to replace rooming house use with hotel. For both sites, a reduced two-way traffic aisle width of 7 meters where 7.3 meters is proposed to be legalized. Brandon?
Thank you through the chair. So for the next few items, we've got, I think, a different planner on each one. So Fabian has stepped in somewhat last minute to help out with this one. I think he has a presentation ready to go. Over to you, Fabian. I think you're on mute, Fabian.
I was on mute. Sorry. Through you, Madam Chair. So I am the planner on file for this application. It's a zoning bylaw amendment where the property consists of both 323 and 327 St. George Street in Port Dover. So the property is located in the urban area of Port Dover. It's located on the southwest corner of the intersection of St. George and Chapman Street West. The corner lot, which is the church lot, which is the property that has the address of 327 St. George Street. For simplicity, we've been referring to it as Part A in this application. So the component for Part A of this application in regards to the zoning amendment is that the applicant is proposing to add a special provision to permit a place of assembly and an event hall with modified definitions. And the applicant has also submitted a supporting consent application to register an easement over the rear of the parcel to permit access to the parking.
Stop for a second. Can you maybe turn off your video and maybe we'll get your audio come through a little bit more clearly? I'll have you try again.
Sure. Is that clear right there?
I'm not sure yet. We'll let you keep going and then I'll stop you if there's a problem.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I couldn't hear anything coming out of my computer. Sorry. So yeah, the applicant has also submitted a consent application to register an easement over the rear of the parcel to permit access to the parking spaces at the back of part one and part two. In terms of part two, which is 323 St. George Street, the applicant is proposing to amend the existing special provision on the subject lands of 14.974 to remove rooming house and add a hotel with modified definitions as a permitted use. It's my understanding that the special provision to 3 St. George Street, and for both sites, there's a reduced two-way traffic aisle width of 7 meters where there's a requirement, where there's a proposed 7.3 meters to be legalized. In terms of technical reports, we received the plan justification report, and the technical comments on the application are still pending. At this point in time, there have been no comments from the public that have been received. And in terms of preliminary considerations, so there is parking is one of them. And so the site currently has a non-partition place different zoning bylaw approved. And staff are recommending that a minimum of 3 spaces be required on the site in lieu of the permitted uses to ensure that there's always some on-site parking available. In terms of employment, the applicants are expecting to hire between 2 and 4 employees. That's my understanding of their proposal for the future. In terms of servicing, there is an existing development moratorium in Port Dover, and additional fixtures are not permitted until additional servicing capacity can be allocated, and a holding is being recommended. In terms of site and design, the applicants are proposing to use the existing building on site, and any additions will be subject to site plan control. And where the point is, because that ties into the adaptive reuse of the building. And so the proposal will maintain the structure, will achieve goals of the official plan regarding maintaining the character of Norfolk's urban areas. So for the next steps and recommendations is essentially the consideration of the public hearing input, issue resolution as per comments, and the recommendation report to follow. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer those, as well as I believe the agent and the property owner are also in the council chambers there to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Fabian. We do have the agent and applicant here, so do you want to hold for questions to staff until after we've heard from them? Did you want to come? Yeah. Now, I understand you're going to make 2 separate presentations, and then the clerk just informed me, well, you'll answer questions together. Does that work? Okay, sounds good.
My name's Helen Larochelle. My husband and I are the owners of both 327 St. George Street and 323 St. George Street. You may recognize me, as I was here 3 years ago to work through the rezoning of 323 St. George Street. We are very attached to Port Dover. We came here from Toronto thinking we would be here on weekends and fell completely in love, abandoned the city, came out here and invested significantly in the community to try and develop some hospitality properties in what we believe is a fastly growing and beautiful tourism opportunity here in this area. 323 St. George Street was rezoned. We worked closely with both the county and our consultants to get the zoning that was required for us to operate what is essentially a 4-room hotel on that site. Because of the size of the hotel, which is smaller than what is normally defined as a hotel, we were told that rooming house would allow us to serve food, have those 4 rooms, accomplish everything in this room. We were very transparent to council that what we were operating was not short-term not short-term rentals or Airbnbs. It was very much a hotel, just in a scale that did not conform to what the definition of hotel was. So moving forward with rooming house, we went ahead with construction. Everything was wonderful. We're very excited. There were delays in the pandemic, but we're dealing with those. But what came to light very recently was that because the word hotel is not in that zoning amendment, when we tried to get our business license as a hotel, the county was not able to provide us with that license because there had to be a very direct connection between the zoning of the property and the license that would be applied. So that is when we came to council. We came to staff as an extension of the rezoning process that we were already exploring on the purchase that we had recently made of the church next door, because we felt that when that church became available, we thought it was an excellent opportunity to expand on the hospitality offering that we wanted to build in Port Dover. It would also allow us access to the rear of the 323 property, which would allow us to provide more parking, because we knew that parking was already one of the contentious issues with the property in the first place. We met all of the requirements for the parking for those 4 rooms, but we knew that there is never enough parking in Port Dover. So by registering the easement across the back of the property with the church, we would be able to add 2 additional parking spots to that rear lot, giving us a total of 6 parking spots at the George. So that is kind of what is going on in relation to 323 St. George Street in terms of what we're asking for on the church. I mean, on both of these fronts, Scott will give you much more detailed kind of technical information. But when we purchased this church, the intention was very much to use it in almost an identical manner to what the church was using it for, which was community gatherings, celebrations, events, musical performances, just generally gatherings. However, that church is, we discovered, institutionally zoned. However, it is neighborhood institutional, not community institutional, which neighborhood institutional has a very, very limited scope of what is usable. Had we been in community institutional, which a lot of other churches are, we would have already been allowed to have a place of entertainment and a place of assembly, which is exactly what we're asking for all the immediate uses we have for the property. The only other thing that we are asking for is we are forward thinkers. We like to try and make things as streamlined as possible and not waste resources that do not need to be wasted. And so we know that at some point in the very distant future, when we have money again, after building multiple hotels, we would like to be able to possibly do a small scale expansion on the church property to offer either additional vacationing public suites or staff accommodations, because we also feel very strongly that there is not just a challenge in housing in the area, but specifically for staff to service tourism. So by doing this now, that means even though we have no direct plans, we may not even build a hotel on the property for 10 or 15 years, at least that use is already on the zoning so that we do not need to repeat the zoning process and use our time, but also staff and council's time. Yes, I'm right at the end. We will not, we want to streamline that process because we know that we will still have to conform to all of the rules of building code, all of the, site plan control. We have admitted that all of those things will still apply to this property should we ever build that hotel. So from our perspective, we are hoping that council can evaluate the current use being the place of assembly and place of entertainment that are in line with what it was already really being used for by the previous church, and realize that the hotel, any and all concerns would be covered by those existing checks and balances that would still be in place should we move forward.
Madam Mayor, Council, long time no see. I think the sun was over here last time I was up here. So yes, just layering on to what Helen spoke about, just on the presentation we have in front of you. Those names should be switched. Obviously, Knox Hall is the old Knox Presbyterian Church, and the George is the previous file that was brought before council. Next slide, please. Introductions. Scott Palandre, project planner with G. Douglas Valley, and obviously Helen here is the applicant and owner. Next slide, please. So again, a lot of this, I will be reiterating a lot of what Helen has brought forward. So obviously the church was purchased in 2019. 2021. So as it's been outlined, we're seeking to have 3 specific uses added: the place of assembly, place of entertainment, and the hotel. We tried to provide some clarity that, as we know from maybe this morning, that clarity in bylaw is important. We did provide clarity in terms of uses that aren't permitted, and we've clearly outlined specifically what can and cannot be. We will be working with staff to provide some clarity on the bylaw, but it's important to note that we've specifically outlined and requested that it's included in the bylaw that use is not permitted. Live adult entertainment facility, bar, nightclub, convenience store, pool hall, etc. Those types of uses. And as Helen has pointed out, they're seeking to have a comprehensive business plan for the entire site. So the future hotel, yes, while it would be an approved use, it would still be required to undergo a number of development controls in terms of site plan or building permits to keep that terms of moratorium of water or any parking concerns that were related. But again, some of the big points is this is a great adaptive reuse of that vacant building. And we do know that Norfolk County, there is a need for event space. So this application does provide that. Next slide, please. Obviously, the George, this, as it's been outlined, has been reviewed by council before. We're only seeking to change the definition. To be honest with you, that Bill C-13 matter that was brought before you in the last agenda item, this likely would have been something we would have brought forward under that clause, but here we are combining it into one. Again, it's a housekeeping amendment required to redefine the permitted use from rooming house to hotel. There's no new proposed land use changes, and it's really required in order to provide clarity to the litany of regulatory agencies that the owner needs to be in compliance with. Next slide, please. So again, we've gone over the location. In our report, we've divided parcel A, parcel B. It is zoned neighborhood institutional, and it's right across the road from the obvious vibrant Port Dover downtown. There is the municipal lot across the road as well. So again, parcel A is the church that we're looking to add the 3 specific uses to the neighborhood institutional. Next slide. So as Helen has pointed out, there are similar uses already permitted within the church or on that property itself under that zone, community center, place of worship, that do allow for very similar social gathering events as proposed for the place of assembly and place of entertainment. A community center or a church could obviously have weddings, social events, social gatherings of that nature. Yes, parking. Port Dover is always a concern. In the planner's report, they've outlined that it's a legal non-conform or complying provision with the parking already on site. We did do an analysis under the bylaw, and the current use is actually requires more parking than the proposed use. So in terms of more in compliance with the bylaw, we're not adding, well, we are adding more parking across the back, but the use is by bylaw standards more in compliant with the bylaw. Some other considerations, obviously, mostly will be short-term parking requirements and the municipal parking lot across the road. Next slide, please. So a lot of conclusions here. The Port Dover secondary plan, one of the things does see the expansion of the downtown business district should that come into effect. Obviously, that is not in effect yet, but the draft mapping does show that would encourage this type of use on that property and dramatically reduce parking requirements. Some other, as we said, gone over, it's a great reuse of the building, provides a much needed event space, compatible with the surrounding uses. It's obviously a positive contribution to Norfolk County tourism and would, through the enabling of potential future overnight accommodations. And as we talked about, those development controls are already in place to work through should they seek to construct that hotel portion in the future. I think I have a thank you. Questions and answers.
Sorry, I'll turn it over to council first, but just a question on the rooming house here. So I don't understand the first zoning change, correct? I'm confused. So we're doing all of this now because we couldn't get a county bylaw or license? I see Brandon nodding. So we're making them go through this process because of our business licensing? It's funny because we were just at a debate and everybody said they would kill the business license.
It also impacts other, it also secondarily impacts other things. Like, for example, if we were to go and we should normally be able to get a minibar license to allow us to have minibars in the rooms. But the AGCO won't consider the property because the first thing they do is they look at the zoning and they don't see the word hotel or motel and they go, we can't license a rooming house.
Okay. Turn it over to other questions. Councilor Vanden Reyschen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Could you reiterate 3 specific uses again? Because I was in La La Land.
So through the mayor, so place of assembly, place of entertainment, and hotel specifically for the Knox Hall property. But again, needs to be reinforced that we very specifically eliminated some potential.
Yes, I'd like to hear
yeah.
those again, that
Yeah.
you eliminated.
Yeah, so in a report on my report here, the exact ones that we've actually requested to have, and we've provided draft definitions. See here are definitions. Place the following secondary or accessory uses shall not be permitted: adult live entertainment facility, bar or nightclub, convenience store, pool hall, bowling alley, private club.
So those are the ones you don't want.
Those are the ones that we want to explicitly to provide clarity to everyone that these
That's right.
things are not allowed on this
Mhm.
property. That's why we would like the inclusion of those
When you-
in the bylaw.
If I can ask, a place of assembly, what type of assembly are you doing? Is it just going to be strictly for entertainment assembly? How does that work?
Basically, we're talking about weddings, celebrations, parties, possibly, music performances, theatrical performances, that, even community gatherings. We do want to make sure that the space is available to the community, to the community as a kind of available rental space for their discussions or events.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor Chop, how does it work? So if you have a wedding or an event, but you don't have a bar or a nightclub, but you could have any bar, like, will you have, fill that gap for me?
So through the mayor, I guess just clarity, are you asking the use specifically?
Oh, is it? Okay, because I understood it more as a liquor licensing question, just because liquor licensing has different, there's different types of licensing. And so when you have catered events, you have the catering endorsement that comes in with the caterers. Yes. But even if we were to get a liquor license for the property, it would still not allow us to operate it as a bar or a nightclub. It still has to fall under what is, an event venue for individual events.
If I may add to that through the mayor, it's also specifically related to the primary use of a property and the accessory and secondary uses. Any serving of alcohol from a license perspective would be accessory to the permitted use of an assembly hall, not the primary use of a bar for the serving of alcohol.
Okay, so thank you for that clarity. And then, so the general public, unless they already were picking up on it and I was slow, there could be alcohol consumption at an event inside your venue. Just because it says not a bar, not a nightclub, doesn't mean that alcohol wouldn't be consumed if there was an event, but you are not going to be a bar as your primary use. You are going to focus on community events and gatherings as the primary use.
Absolutely. The alcohol would only be consumed in the context of an event, in the same way that if, you were to cater a wedding at your house and that caterer brought their catering endorsement, people would still drink alcohol at that event, but you would not be operating a bar.
Other questions from council?
Yeah, just as a clarity. So if there's a wedding, it's the wedding party or the wedding, whoever rented it, go after the license so that they can serve alcohol at that function.
We would prefer to be able to facilitate that for them. There's different ways that event venues approach that. So we would prefer to not require that our guests go and have to source special events, like individual special events licenses. We would like to have, as an event venue, kind of the same way, it's a bad example, I guess, but the stadium in Hamilton, that's a really bad example. I don't want you to think that this is a stadium. It's not. But I don't, like, the Lions Club serves beer. So it would be kind of.
But they have their own license.
That's what I'm saying. That's how we want this to be set up, so that our property can have a license as an event venue, so that we can facilitate that for our guests, clients, customers. Yeah, it's not walk into the public. The only people that would be allowed to consume alcohol at these events are people invited to the event.
Any other questions from council? Okay, any comments on the holding provision with this?
In terms of holding provision, it may be unnecessary because I do feel, as we've outlined, that the development controls are already in place to prevent. It was a thing for the existing washrooms where building permits weren't issued and no connection permits weren't issued. So controls are in place while the water moratorium is a thing to prevent building permits from being issued. And in terms of the construction itself, it has to go through site plan control. If there was going to be further, adjustments or construction to the building, if we were going to make any huge additions. So I do feel that those controls are already in place, so it may be redundant.
Just to add to that, I mean, that speaks to the further expansion, the future expansion on the hotel side. On the event side, we have actually already been in communication and have a building permit to add washrooms to the church property. And that has been done in collaboration with the building department with a clear understanding that any of these washrooms that we are currently permitted to build will not be connected until the water moratorium is lifted. So we've already been very transparent and forthcoming with the fact that to operate this event venue, we know that we will need more facilities. And we know that we were not able to connect them or use any more water. So we're not connected. They are officially declared as not being connected until.
But your capacity, you're adding the washrooms to better serve your customers. You're not changing the number of, you're not adding increased capacity once you have these additional washrooms, right? The capacity of the event venue is the capacity of the event venue.
The capacity of the event venue will be identical to what the existing capacity of
When
the
there's
church
the new
was.
washrooms or no new washrooms.
Yeah, we are not adding capacity with those new washrooms.
So this is where I'm not sure that I buy into this holding capacity. So we have had people tear down homes in Port Dover and build a new home that is a bigger home with more fixtures in it because they built a bigger home, but it still has 4 people living in the home and they're not going to the bathroom anymore just because they might choose to go in a different washroom morning, noon, and night. The volume of output is the same. So this is where the holding provision kind of got me, because if it's an event venue, why would we not be letting them hook up the washrooms? It's just providing a better service for the community. It's not at all changing the outflow of the effluent from the building. If there's 50 people and they use 2 washrooms, they're going to put out the same amount as the 50 people use 4 washrooms, right?
We did what we were told to do to follow the rules.
It's
But
some,
I don't
some of the
disagree
rules I
with
have a
you.
concern with, because that's not an even playing field from the homes that I've seen go up with more fixtures, and I've supported when those came forward to the building department as well. I would have advocated on their behalf too. It's the same number of people, it's the same amount of stuff. So why would we be imposing such a restriction? Councillor Van Passen, go ahead.
Hopefully from the previous item that we just approved, maybe this is one of those minor things that staff can fix on their own. I agree with your logic. Last year, the year before, we had a case where they made a farmer remove a bunch of toilets from his bunkhouse for the same kind of reason. Like everybody gets up in the morning, same time, and they had to remove them because they had too many. And they don't use anymore. They don't use the facilities more just because there's more places to sit. But you're exactly right. The logic doesn't make sense. But if the applicant is happy that they can at least move forward and get it constructed, they can work on changing that, I'm sure, based on the logic you've just laid out.
Well, it's not, I don't think it relates to the first report at all. I mean, this is a holding
Where it
provision.
relates
It's in
to
terms.
is that staff can make minor adjustments without having to come back to council for approval.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity for myself, at least, to make sort of a point in this regard so that they can move ahead with their business. I mean, this is where when you have a new entrepreneur that is dealing with roadblock after roadblock, and they're literally, this makes absolutely no sense to have a holding provision on this whatsoever. I would also argue in terms of the zoning, what's the view in terms of, you know, if you already were having events there, is there not some element of legal nonconforming in that case? If weddings were already being held, I know there's somewhat of a twist by having catering in a restaurant and so on, but any views from you guys?
Common sense, yes, I would completely agree with you. I would have to, it gets into definitions within the bylaw and how that's applicable. And I think from the applicant standpoint, they need to make it, and this is what we've tried to do with the suggestions in the bylaw, explicitly clear within that bylaw of what is and isn't, so they can better move forward. Because yes, I would agree that these are very similar uses. That's why this proposal makes sense. But from the applicant's perspective, that they just need to be, they'd still be in the same issue in the future if they did try to build, you know, whatever it may be. You're not a place of entertainment, you're not a licensed whatever. So this provides clarity for them. And in terms of the mayor's point, yes, from a common sense standpoint, absolutely. But sometimes definitions certainly do matter.
This is the stuff I find such a challenge. These are like the exact type of entrepreneurs that we should be making things easier for, not harder for. So thanks for coming. If there's no further questions from the deputation, I'll open up the floor if anybody else is here to make remarks, speak in favor or against the application. Anyone online? Okay, if not, you guys can have a seat. Oh, sorry, sir. If you want to speak, they're gonna take a seat anyway. And if you want to speak, you can come up and state your name and address at the podium and
My name is Jerry Sinkowski. I live down the street from the proposed, whatever we're proposing. I live at 114 Chapman Street. I don't understand both this changing of the roadway from 7 meters. Yeah, what is that all about?
what we'll do, put your questions out there, and then once you sit down, we'll get staff to clarify all of them for you. It's not really, people come to make their comments and so on. It's less of a question and answer period, but if you put your questions out there, one of the counselors will pose it to staff once you take your seat.
Okay, basically
That's the only one?
yeah, just I don't understand it. Right, I guess. So anyway, that's all I have to say.
Sure, through the chair to answer the question from the deputation. What's proposed by the applicant is to legalize the on-site driveway width. So it's not necessarily anything to do with the road on Chapman Street or St. George. It's to get that back parking lot. Right now it's deficient. So the standard for the county standard is 7.3 meters wide to make sure people can back up and get in. But they're recommending it be 30 centimeters smaller because that's what exists and all that fits on the site.
Sounds good. Took me a couple times reading that too to put that together. Any further questions from council to staff? Councilor Columbus.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question for Brandon. What is the definition, the county bylaw definition of a rooming house?
Through the mayor, if you give me a moment, I was actually on the county bylaw of the other two definitions, place of assembly and place of entertainment, so you threw me a curveball there. Unless Tricia or Fabian are online and they can jump in. Oh, there she goes. Rooming house is a single detached dwelling not exceeding 600 square meters in an area containing individual rooms rented with or without meals for lodging or sleeping accommodation, may provide communal but not individual cooking facilities. A rooming house does not include a hotel or bed and breakfast. I think that's where the licensing issue came in, because in that definition it says not include a hotel.
So there's no limit on the number of rooms in the hotel or in the rooming house then?
I believe, and the applicant or the planning staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the existing one is limited to 4. And I think that the proposal is to just allow a hotel of 4, just so it has that clear wording as they expressed. So it's clear, it's in the zoning, everybody for everyone in day knows that's allowed, that can be licensed, that can get whatever license it needs.
Thank you, that's great.
Further questions from council? Before moving the staff recommendation, then Brandon, I'm happy to pass the floor if nobody else on council wants to do it. How would you like it recorded in terms of that holding provision? 'Cause I just can't buy into that logic.
Through the chair, I think that can be the comments that we received today from members of council or any member of council or from the applicant public, and then engineering staff can take that under advisement along with other staff. What's proposed right now is just a draft bylaw that has the standard holding provision clause. It's a fairly new application that was just circulated as well, so staff don't know if there's more being proposed, like additional washrooms, additional capacity for these items. But if it's a like for like, that's one thing versus if they're adding new. And so if it's taken as a comment, then that will be addressed in the council report, and we'll circle back with engineering and any building staff that are needed.
Okay, perfect. Any further comments from council? Somebody can move the staff recommendation then. Councillor Vanden Rishi, seconded by Councillor Columbus. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to the next report, which is OPNL 2022250 and ZNPL 2022251, proposing to amend the official plan by adding a site-specific policy to the existing agricultural designation of the subject lands and change the zoning from agricultural to rural commercial. That's CD 22-090. And is that Fabian again?
Through the chair, I believe Mohammed is making his return for this file.
Welcome, Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Brandon. These subject lands are located at the intersection of Plowmas Line and Jackson Side Road at the west side of Cortland urban area. The 3.77 hectare lands currently comprises with one single detached dwelling. There is one 230 square meter burn, one wood-sided shade, and one metal shed. The lands are basically surrounded by agricultural lands with hazard lands at the south, east, and west side. And the subject lands are, as I mentioned already, designated as agricultural and also zoned as agricultural. There is no active farm on this land, but most of the flat lands are categorized as Class 2 Canadian land inventory, which actually identifies the type and quality of the soil for farm activity. So the development proposal is for 1-story, 582 square meter electrical office and warehouse. And the proposal also includes approximately 9 employment opportunities. The proposed use is not permitted in the official plan designation. An official plan amendment would be required to permit the proposed electrical business and warehouse as a site-specific policy. The proposed use is not permitted in the agricultural zone. Therefore, a zoning bylaw amendment will also be required to either change the zoning from agricultural to a compatible zone or adding a special provision to allow the proposed use. Staff has concern to change the zoning from agricultural to other zone, such as rural commercial, which might be more compatible for this kind of use. And also currently working with agent to explore any other alternatives available to address this change. We received technical reports, including a planning justification report, a traffic impact brief, which are under review right now. No public input has been received so far. All technical comments will be provided during the recommendation report. Similar to all other applications, staff will look at critical issues related to parking facilities, traffic, and then building height, servicing, the proximity of the subject lands to any hazard land or woodlands, and that will be reflected to the recommendation report. Once we receive all the technical comments and public comments, we'll submit the recommendation report, and staff recommend that this report is received for information. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I believe Mr. Benjamin from CGDL, who's the agent for this application, is also available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Benjamin, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Trevor Benjamins from CJDL Consulting Engineers in Tilsonburg. I'm the agent on the application. I'm speaking on behalf of the owners of TA Thompson Electrical Contractors. I'd like to thank council for hearing our public hearing this afternoon, as well as Mohammed for his support through our file thus far. And I'd be able to answer any questions that the council may have in regards to this application.
Any questions for the agent? Doesn't look like it. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the application? Is anyone on the line that wishes to speak to the application? Okay, seeing none. Any questions from council to staff? In that case, does somebody wish to move the staff recommendation? Thank you, Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Michelli. All those in favor? That's carried. Moving on to 4.4, ZNPL 2022223 is proposing to remove a site-specific provision permitting a contractor's yard as a use in the Hamlet residential zoning of 2063 Main Street, Walsingham, along with the rezoning of a portion of the property to Hamlet residential to conform to the official plan designation. And Brandon, if you'd like to go ahead.
Sure, thanks through the chair. I believe we have Hannah here to present this one, and I believe the agent is here as well. And there may be a bit of a last minute change on the recommended bylaw. So we'll let Hannah and the agent walk us through that.
Thank you, Brandon. Through Madam Chair, if you can permit me one moment, I'll just be pulling up the slideshow. Okay, thank you for your patience. So just to clarify, I understand there was some administrative error on the zoning code and perhaps the original report. So just to clarify that zoning code is ZMPL 2022-233. So my apologies. The subject property is located at 2063 Main Street, Walsingham, southwest of the intersection of Main Street, Walsingham and Concession Street in the hamlet of Walsingham. The surrounding land uses are predominantly single detached dwellings with some areas of wetland and hazard land to the west. And there are some areas of significant woodland interspersed throughout the subject lands. So the subject lands are designated hamlet and hazard lands in the official plan and zoned hamlet residential, agricultural, and hazard land in the zoning bylaw. There is a site-specific special provision over a portion of the land zoned hamlet residential and hazard land, which permits a contractor's yard. And this is defined in that site-specific special provision as an establishment where construction equipment is stored and repaired. So the original proposal as received, which is reflected in the report and presentation slides for council, was to amend the zoning bylaw to do two things. So staff had asked the applicant if they were interested in pursuing a zoning change to amend the portion of lands zoned agricultural to hamlet residential in order to be in conformity with the hamlet designation. And we found some agreeances, and the application was amended to reflect this. And the original proposal requested that the site-specific provision be removed. So today, the applicant has requested that this zoning bylaw amendment be approved as originally submitted. So again, to clarify, we're only removing the site-specific provision from what will be parts 3 and part 1 in this mapping as shown. And staff have prepared an amended recommended bylaw to reflect this request. So for transparency, we do have an available amended bylaw with track changes. And we also have a finalized version of this new amended bylaw that is available if council decides to approve it as such. There is no physical development proposed in relation to this application. Just some preliminary considerations. Broadly, we can understand this is relating to natural heritage features as no development is proposed, and the subject application might reduce the likelihood of development on these features. Conversely, we could conceptualize this application as potentially removing some very localized employment as it pertains to a contractor's yard as a permitted use. Oh, sorry. Looks like I closed that by accident. Apologies. So the reports submitted as part of a complete application include a conceptual site plan sketch. We didn't require any technical reports due to the relatively simple nature of this application. Standard agency comments have been received since the preparation of this report, with no significant concerns raised, and no comments from the public are received to date. So in the nature of a public hearing committee, we're providing this report be received for information, and we're happy to recommend approval if council is interested in pursuing that as proposed by the applicant. Thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions or comments.
Thanks, Hannah. Questions from council? Mary, did you wish to speak to the application?
I just wanted to clarify that it was this morning that I understood from my client that you would prefer not to make the change from agriculture to the hamlet residential. And so that's why the last minute change. So I really appreciate staff bringing forward the changes as quickly as they have today to address my client's concerns. When we submitted the application in July, we only had removed the contractor's yard, and that was it. It was in September that staff said, can we do this exercise in conformity by changing the other part of the zoning? And on sober second thought, my client is saying, no, please don't. I have some options I might want to do with that agriculturally zoned land. And so please don't make life complicated, just leave it the way it is. So thank you so much. If there's any questions, I can answer.
Thanks, Mary. Questions from council? Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the application? Seeing none, then if I could have a mover.
Through the mayor, just before you go forward. So the bylaw that was presented is not accurate on the council agenda. So council may want to see the bylaw up on the screen. If Hannah could just put it up just so you see what that change was.
Yep, I can do that. If you can permit me one moment, please.
And through the chair, I think if we can just be 100% certain on what the recommendation is. We were originally doing this one as a fairly minor one where we're actually recommending to approve it today because there's a subsequent council to adopt this so they can just move ahead. I noticed Hannah had a receipt for information. I don't know if that's related to this last minute change or not, but if we could just confirm what our recommendation is today, that council or a committee would be recommending.
Okay, I believe that is the correct one. If that is showing. So this will show the track changes from the bylaw, which was attached to the report. So essentially what is changing will be a new map, which we've included below. So this just encapsulates that site-specific special provision, which is being removed. The language will follow suit. So part 1 of map A, which is that hazardland portion, from hazard land with the site-specific special provision to just hazard land is remaining the same. We're removing the previous proposal from agricultural to RH, which would be part 2, and then keeping part 3, which is residential hamlet with the site-specific provision to residential hamlet with a number change just to keep it sequential. And similarly, the purpose and effect will reflect that removal of the conformity exercise with maintaining the original proposal.
Through the chair, then for clarity, and we're just confirming with the clerk. So the recommendation, we would need to revise slightly. That's before committee. I don't know if the clerk can, oh, you already got it up. So we would be removing the words from agricultural to residential hamlet as part of that. And I would suggest at the very end to add as amended. The bylaws amended as Hannah was just displaying. So it says, be approved as shown in attachment C to report CD 22-085 as amended.
Okay, I can't remember who the mover and seconder was. Did I have one yet? Councilor Shelley, thanks. Second by Councilor Martin. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. And the final item, ZNPL 2022223, proposing to remove a site-specific provision permitting a contractor's yard as a use in the hamlet residential zoning of 2063 Main Street, Walsingham. Excellent. Where's the next one? I don't have the next one here. I just did that one. That's all I have. Oh. Stand by. 4.5 staff report. That's a long day. Staff report CS 22-168, the proposed closure and conveyance of King Street Plan 48B in Wyndham. Kelly, I guess, are you presenting this report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members. Report CS 22-168 is being presented to the Public Hearings Committee for information purposes to allow the public an opportunity to express concerns, comments, objections, or support with regards to the request by the applicants for the permanent closure and conveyance of King Street, Plan 48B, adjacent to their properties. The report provides the nature of the request by the applicants along with other related details. Realty staff did not receive any public input with regards to the proposed street closure. A further report will be presented to council at a later date for the purposes of a decision. Staff are here today to hear from the public and to answer any questions council members and the public may have related to the requested road closure. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Any questions from council? Is there anyone in attendance that wishes to speak to the report? I see an extra couple people here, but you guys, Mr. Musso, what were you here for? Okay. I've been waiting on edge. All right, is there anyone on the line that wishes to speak to this report? Okay, in that case, if somebody wishes to move the staff recommendation, Councilor Columbus, thanks, seconded by Councilor Kravitz. All those in favor? That's carried. I'll need a motion to adjourn public hearings at 4:06 PM. Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? All right, and we are going to reconvene now. Are we good to just move into it with the October 5th council meeting? So we'll begin with reports of the committees of the whole. Section 9.2, public hearing committee minutes from October 5th, 2022. The public hearing committee meeting minutes, including the 5 resolutions passed at the meeting, are before us for approval, including the following. These items were received for information only. Staff report CD 22-088, application ZNPL 2022265-323 St. George and 327 St. George. Staff report CD 22-090 regarding applications OPN PL 2022250 and ZNPL 2022251 are proposing to amend the official plan by adding a site-specific policy to the existing agricultural designation of the subject lands and change the zoning from agricultural to rural commercial, as well as staff report CS 22-168 regarding the proposed closure and conveyance of King Street Plan 48B in Windham, Norfolk County. Items approved for decision. Staff report CD 22-093 regarding the county-initiated official plan amendment and implementing bylaw to streamline and delegate decisions on certain types of minor zoning bylaws in accordance with Bill 13 changes to the Ontario Planning Act, CD 22-093. And staff report CD 22-085 regarding applications at NPL 2022223 that is proposing to remove a site-specific provision permitting a contractor's yard as a use in the Hamlet residential zoning of 2063 Main Street, Walsingham. Are there any errors or omissions? I'm going to assume not, since you haven't actually read it on paper. If I could have a motion to approve the minutes as presented, moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Councillor Vanden Rishi. All those in favor? That is carried. Does any council member wish to speak to any of the bylaws that are before you? And Teresa, the bylaw then will be adjusted accordingly.
Yes, I think I've captured it in I think I gave you a new motion. Yeah, I think it's captured there. So just to clarify, the forestry bylaw was removed from the motion that's going to be read, and the bylaw that we just amended will be approved as amended. So if you want, do you want me to bring it over to you? Yeah. Lost. Do you want me to read it? It'd be great. Okay. So we need a mover and seconder that the following bylaws be approved, signed by the mayor and clerk and affixed with the corporate seal. Bylaw 10 OP 2022, bylaw 32Z 2022, bylaw 33Z 2022 as amended, bylaws 34Z 2022 to 36Z 2022 inclusive, bylaws 2022-103, 2022-104, 2022-106, and 2022-107.
Perfect. Thank you. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Michelle, seconded by Councillor Huffman. All those in favor? That's carried. No late closed items today, and so we're moving on to the confirming bylaw. If I could have a motion to approve bylaw 2022-105 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Norfolk County at this regular council meeting held on the 5th day of October 2022. Councillor Huffman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That's carried. And finally, a motion to adjourn. Thanks, Councillor Huffman, at 4:11 p.m., seconded by Councillor Van Passen. All those in favor? That's carried, and meeting is adjourned.